Luke Jones covers the Baltimore Ravens. WNST, Baltimore, BaltimorePositive.com, at Baltimore Luke, and he joins us now. We've been kind of talking, Luke, trying to find something. You're around this team all the time, so you can give us a little bit more insight, or as much as you're allowed to in the COVID 2020 season. I don't know how close we're all allowed to get to these teams anymore, but we're trying to find, through our conversations and watching this team from afar like we do, you're there all the time, where Baltimore has struggled this year. What's the weakness of this team? Because it seems like the listeners, the callers, people, we just can't seem to find where Baltimore struggles, other than maybe if they get behind in a game and they have to chuck it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of been the ongoing story since the start of the Lamar Jackson era with their two playoff losses. I mean, for all the success they had last year, you saw what happened to them against Tennessee in the divisional round. But I'll give you the relative weakness. And again, understanding some of the offensive struggles the Eagles have had, and my brother-in-law is a diehard Philadelphia fan, so I'm pretty familiar with them as well. But the Ravens' offense hasn't been the dynamic record-setting group that it was last year. Now, you look at the raw rushing numbers, they're averaging 5.6 yards per carry. But if you look at it situationally, they haven't run the ball especially well on first down. That's put Lamar Jackson in more second and longs than he was last year, and they've struggled in that regard with their passing game. Again, you look at the scoring per game, it looks fine. They're basically middle of the pack in total offense. Their running game is still very much a top 5, top 6 kind of group. But you do look at the passing game, they're 31st in passing yards per game. I don't think that's the best indicator because they were 27th in that department last year. But the efficiency has definitely taken a hit. So everyone expected this offense to lead the way for them. They've still been good. They're still better than many teams around the league. But it's really been their defense that has just been absolutely lights out. Their defense and their special teams have been elite, whereas their offense has just been kind of pretty good, which you'll take most years, but when you're coming off of a year where I think they had 58 offensive touchdowns, it has felt like some regression there that maybe some people weren't anticipating in these parts.
Now, Luke, I got to imagine if you're Greg Roman, who's a local guy, and he's watching film and he's saying, that 47 looks pretty lousy. Mark Andrews has to be having just a phenomenal time this week getting ready, knowing how weak the Eagles' linebacking core is. So is this a matchup, the Eagles' defense, the linebackers, the weakness? If your linebackers are the weakest part of your defense, that does not match up well with Baltimore.
No, not at all. And, I mean, that's something I just got finished writing at our station's website that, you look at the Eagles' defensive line and you say, yeah, I mean, they've got some names there. They're pretty good at stopping the run. But the teams that have success, and it's relative, no one's really shut the Ravens' offense down, but the teams that have more success are the teams that, first of all, are stout up front. So, yeah, Philadelphia checks that box, but you have to have the linebackers that are disciplined and athletic enough to pull off some of those scrape exchange where the defensive end crashes inside and then you have to fill to meet the quarterback. But if your linebackers don't get there and they're not in position, Lamar Jackson's going to kill you with his legs. And then, to your point, when you're talking about the passing game, the Ravens, their biggest strength is throwing over the middle of the field, led by Mark Andrews, who has 5 touchdown catches already this season. And linebackers and safeties, typically, they have a tough time with him, and knowing that is a weakness for this Philadelphia defense. That's why I said if there's something you're pointing to, yeah, I could see the Eagles stopping the run between the tackles with their stout front, but I think this sets up to be potentially a big day for Mark Andrews and for Lamar Jackson's legs on Sunday.
How do you expect them to play Travis Fulgham? He's this kid who came out of nowhere, 10 receptions, 152 yards, and without Deshaun Jackson being there and a lot of injuries, Alshon Jeffrey as well, it's not like there's many other weapons besides Zach Ertz to really look out for in the passing game, unless you want to throw Miles Sanders in there as well, of course.
Yeah, I think Miles Sanders is probably the guy to watch because the Ravens, they cleaned it up last week, but if you go back to playing Washington and especially against Edwards-Helaire and Kansas City on that Monday night game, they've struggled with backs out of the backfield, but their secondary is really the strength of their defense. They have Marcus Peters and Marlon Humphrey. They're outside corners in the base defense. When they go to nickel, They slide Humphrey into the slot, and they have Jimmy Smith, who's a long-time above-average starting corner when he's been healthy. So, as you mentioned, Travis Fulgham's been a great story the last couple weeks. I know John Harbaugh has even said that that's someone that he liked coming out of the draft, even though he wasn't a high-profile guy a couple years ago. But I think with the Ravens, are they so concerned with Fulgham that they are going to feel compelled to have one of their corners travel with him? Probably not. I think they'll stick to kind of doing what they do with their corners on their respective sides. But this is just such a tough secondary to match up to. And then when you talk about the Eagles right now, they're down to one original starting offensive lineman from the start of the year available on Sunday with Jason Kelsey, and knowing that Lane Johnson's not playing. I think that offensive line, they're going to be hard-pressed to keep the Ravens' pass rush at bay the way they love to blitz and deceive up front to give Carson Wentz enough time to try to find Fulgham in open space.
Luke Jones covers the Baltimore Ravens, WNST Radio, BaltimorePositive.com, and they're in town, and they've won 8 straight road games. And not only do they win them pretty handily. So the Eagles usually have a pretty good home field advantage. They're going to be about 7,000 people there. But, Baltimore being a 9.5-point favorite on the road here doesn't seem to faze them much. It just seems that they're so focused whether they're home or away.
And that's what's kind of amazing. I just told you that, they haven't been firing on all cylinders the way they did last year, where, especially the second half of the season, you just said it, even on the road, they were just boat racing teams. I think a lot of people remember what they did to the Rams on that Monday night game in November. They've been not just winning on the road, but dominant on the road. And, that takes on a little bit of a different context. We're talking about a pandemic season where, this will be the first time the Ravens are playing in front of more than they've had 250 family members that have been able to come to the last couple home games of players in the organization. So that'll be a little bit of probably a boost to both teams from an energy standpoint, but probably not that same Philadelphia home field advantage. But this is just a focused team, and when you look at how they profile, their biggest strengths, of course, are their running game, and their defense has played absolutely terrific football since last October. In fact, it was earlier this week was the 1-year anniversary of the Marcus Peters trade, and that completely turned around their defense last year. So when you profile doing those things particularly well, those are things that travel. So I think that's a big reason why this team has been as successful as it is. And, I don't want to sell Philadelphia too short because it's the NFL. And, the Eagles' offense looked a little bit better last week, but I think, if both these teams are, given who's available right now or are playing at their best, it feels like it's a game the Ravens should win relatively comfortably, I'd say.
We mentioned the Eagles linebacking core, specifically Nate Gerry, who has been struggling. What have you seen out of Patrick Queen where you think, damn, this guy is good?
He has flashed. The first few weeks of the season, he would make a couple plays a game where you're just like, wow, that's really impressive. But then you'd see him get lost in coverage. He's acknowledged that the game has been a little too fast for him, but he's the kind of kid that even though he's made some mistakes, you're never seeing him make a mistake because he's hesitating too much or he's not giving full effort. He's been a max effort guy, and what he did against Cincinnati last week, it kind of came all together. Granted, the Bengals' offensive line was completely overwhelmed against the Ravens' blitz, but you saw him make plays as a blitzer, made stops in the run game. His pass coverage looked much better. So he's someone who's still going to make some mistakes. Keep in mind, this is a kid who didn't start. He only had one full year as a starter at LSU. So just turned 21 over the summer. He's a really young NFL rookie. So he'll still make some mistakes, and I think there's a potential for if Miles Sanders is matched up against him, I could see Miles Sanders getting the better of him a couple times here or there. But Patrick Queen, the athleticism, the speed, the playmaking ability that he's shown in his 5 games, he's not Ray Lewis just yet or anything like that. Let's not put too much pressure on the kid, but he's certainly shown signs that he could be a really good football player at this level.
Well, I know, as we mentioned, Baltimore very good on the road. They've got, obviously, they're a big favorite in this game. If Baltimore was to head back with a loss here, what happened in that game? Where do you see it? If Baltimore lost this game, what happened?
Well, I mean, I already mentioned, I think there is a potential for Philadelphia's defensive line to be able to contain the between the tackles run. That's something that, like I said, stats aside, they've had some choppiness in that area. They've had some struggles running on first down. They've had some times where they kind of lose their identity. So I could see that. As I mentioned, I mean, if there's one thing that I'd say has been a weakness for this defense, it has been covering backs out of the backfield. And when you look at how banged up the Eagles continue to be at wide receiver and tight end, with Dallas Goedert out as well, you could see Miles Sanders. Maybe that's something they untap that they did last year with his rookie year, but haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of that. And then, beyond that, Lamar Jackson last week threw a pick. He probably should have had 3 or 4 picks. I mean, that's probably the worst passing game I've seen him have in a while. So, not so much a Lamar Jackson thing, but the Ravens not taking care of the football. I mean, those are kind of the things that I would point to. Those couple keys on offense and defense. But I think it is a case where if the Ravens play sound fundamentally and protect the football, I think they're the favorite for a reason in this one. And again, you don't want to sell Philadelphia too short, but the body of work for each team speaks for itself so far this season.
Luke Jones covers the Ravens for WNST, BaltimorePositive.com. Real quick, Greg Roman, is there thoughts that he is possibly a head coaching candidate somewhere down the line? I mean, obviously, I think he's done a great job in terms of accentuating the positives of what he has on offense there. But is he a guy? And if he left, would that be a big loss for that offense?
I mean, I think it would be. I mean, with Greg Roman last year, I mean, the fact that the Ravens had the bye, sometimes that helps the coach, but when you're deep into the playoffs or deeper into the playoffs, it can hurt you. I mean, it all depends how teams do that. So, he talked to some teams last year, but I think for me, with Greg Roman, it's got to be a team that has a quarterback that has a unique skill set. No one's Lamar Jackson. Let's be clear about that. But a team that has a mobile quarterback that wants to play a little bit differently than everyone else and wants to be a little more creative. I mean, the Ravens zig while everyone else is zagging. I mean, that's kind of been their offensive mantra over the last couple of years since they moved on from Joe Flacco. So I think for the right fit, I think Greg Roman could be a successful head coach in this league, and I think it would be a loss for the Ravens because anywhere this guy has been, they've run the football well, and the Ravens have been a team that has long wanted to run the football. I mean, that's always been part of their identity to some degree, but they went through some stretches where they weren't able to do it so well, and from the moment that he arrived in town as an assistant, they got that running game back on track for the first time in a long time.
You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Merrill Reese, Mike Quick, they have the call starting at 1 o'clock. Luke Jones covers the Ravens, and he was kind enough to join us, like all guests, on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. Luke, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, guys. Enjoy the game on Sunday.